Good morning. I'm welcome to the SACE conference. I'm Massimo Zimbone, and I work for the National Council of Research of Italy, in particular in the Institute of Microelectronics and Microsystems. Today, I'm going to speak about the interaction between inverted domain boundaries and stacking faults, and I will show you some experiments and some simulation. This work was done in collaboration with several companies, in particular with the LPE company, the Novasic, and the ST Microelectronics. Okay, this work was done in the framework of the Challenge project, that is a project of Horizon 2020. So, first of all, I like to start from the economics of the silicon carbide. If you now try to buy two devices, one device is built in silicon and the other one built in silicon carbide, you have that the cost of the silicon carbide device is higher of about 10%. This is due to the high cost of the substrate, the silicon carbide substrate. In fact, a 4H silicon carbide substrate costs 500 euros. Instead, the same wafer, but the same wafer, but in silicon, costs 40 euro. A way to reduce the cost of the silicon carbide could be to grow the silicon carbide on silicon. In this case, the cost should arrive to 600 euro, but the only polytype that can be grown on silicon is the 3C silicon carbide, not the 4H silicon carbide. This is for the more dynamic reason, because 3C is stable at low temperature. So, but the problem is a problem now of the heteroepitaxy of material science, in particular of the heteroepitaxy of one material on another. In fact, here I show you the TEM cross-section in which I show the interface between the silicon and the silicon carbide. Here we have a huge amount of defect at the hetero interface that this defect propagate into the epi layer, creating the two kinds of defect. One is the inverted domain boundary, this curved line here, and the other one is this straight line here that are stacking faults. Both these two extended defects, the inverted domain boundary and the stacking fault, are detrimental for the devices because they produce a high leakage current in the junction. The leakage current in the junction is proportional in a log-log scale with the density of the stacking fault. Another problem is related to the second fault is the difference in the thermal expansion coefficient. When we grow our epi layer on silicon, we grow at about 400 degrees. Then we decrease the temperature to room temperature. But the two materials have a difference in thermal expansion coefficients. So this means that silicon carbide contracts more than the silicon, and then the wafer can bend. The maximum allowed bend is 100 micron. Instead, in some wafer, the bend could be very high and also break the wafer. But these two particular, the stress and the stacking fault are strictly correlated. I want to recall you, okay, some ideas about the dislocation and the stacking fault. When you apply a stress in a crystal, first of all, the crystal responds elastically, so it deforms a bit. Then, when a critical shear stress is reached, a dislocation can be created and also start moving into the crystal. So, but in 3C silicon carbide, the discussion is a little bit more complicated. In fact, it have not a simple cubic crystal like this one, but is an FCC. In other, moreover, we have that in silicon carbide we have a different type of different polytype. We have the 3C polytype, the cubic one, in which the atoms, silicon and carbon, are aligned in this way. And also we have the hexagonal polytypes, in which silicon and carbon are on a zigzag shape, okay? Zigzag structure here. What happens when we apply a stress? And when we apply a stress, atoms could be aligned on a blue line here, can move, okay, and move on one vector, that is the Berger vector of the stacking fault, and then move from this position to this other position here. So we have the structure represented here, so a zigzag like this one. This means that in this case we have a stacking fault, a fault in the stacking order of the crystal. So we have a stacking fault. When partial dislocation moves into the crystal, they create this kind of structure here, a stacking fault. But in 3C silicon carbide, we have different kind of stacking fault that are stable. In particular, we have the intrinsic one, where we have only one shifted layer, or the stacking fault 2, when we we have 2 layers that are shifted, a stacking fault 3, or a conservative stacking fault, in which we have 3 layers that are shifted. But in 3C we have also another kind of defect, the inverted domain boundary, in particular a green boundary. Okay. So in this image, I show you the surface of one sample that was etched in KUH at 500 degrees. So you can observe here some vertical line that are the stacking fault that arrive on the surface. Okay, in this and this curved line here, and inside the stacking fault that are horizontal. So this means that this curved line here is a grain boundary. So we have 2 different crystals inside and outside the grain boundary. So, but we want to understand which kind of crystal is inside inside this boundary, and we performed a high-resolution TEM image in cross-section. And what we observed here, okay, this line, white line here and structure here is the boundary. Okay, on the left and on the right, we have basically the same crystal, but the only difference is that the silicon and carbon are rotated upside down. So here we have the silicon down and the carbon up, and here instead we have the silicon in the upper position and the carbon is down. So we have a particular kind of grain boundary that is called inverted domain boundary, or APB, anti-phase boundary, but we will call it inverted domain boundary. We want to understand which is also the very nature of this boundary here, and we performed a high-resolution TEM image in this region that is highlighted with this square, red square. So what we observed in this image here on the left, instead on the right, I show you the reconstruction of this image, or the position of the silicon and the carbon atoms. First of all, I have to note that here the silicon is down and the carbon is in the upper position, and in this crystal here, instead we have that the silicon is in the upper position and the carbon is down. This is the first thing. The second thing is the boundary is constituted by a silicon-silicon bond. Okay, the second important thing. And the third thing, also important thing, is the structure of this boundary. If you note that here the silicon and carbon are vertically aligned, instead here the silicon and carbon are not vertically aligned, are almost horizontally, and we should expect that this carbon here should be there in order to have this the same structure here. This means that this layer is a stacking fault, in particular a stacking fault 1. We found a lot of different stacking faults that are correlated with the inverted domain boundary, but we always found that the inverted domain boundary, so the green boundary, is related with a kind of stacking fault. That can be 1, can be stacking fault 2, or can be stacking fault 3. Okay, then we wanted to understand why this green boundary and also the stacking fault appear are generated in our crystal. So we performed some simulation, kinetic Monte Carlo simulation, in order to understand, to study the time evolution of the thick surface during the growth. And this work was done in collaboration with Giuseppe Fisicaro, that works in the group of Antonino Lamagna. So they are able to grow the crystal with the kinetic Monte Carlo simulation with the same experimental parameter that we use during our real growth. And then they start from a perfect crystal and they grow the perfect crystal. And in this case, we have no generation of defects, only point defects. But when they introduce an inverted domain boundary and start the growth, they have the formation of defects, and in particular the formation of stacking faults. In fact, due to the surface instability during the growth, it's possible that on the surface near the inverted domain boundary, near the green boundary, it's possible to create some seed on which the stacking fault, we have the stacking fault nucleation. Here I show you in this image this line here represent the partial dislocation, that border the stacking fault. Okay, and in particular here I show you, this is a three-dimensional, obviously, image. In this image here, I take the D1 of the last slide, and the blue point here are the partial dislocations. The gray point the gray point are the atoms that belongs to the inverted domain boundary, and in particular the black arrow indicates the place where the stacking fault is generated. So the last slide here, in the last slide I want to show you another work done by Filippo Giannazzo with Giuseppe Greco. In this work, they studied the local electrical behavior of the inverted domain boundary and the stacking fault. First of all, they individuated the inverted domain boundary here, okay, by the presence of a furrow in the surface. And then they applied with the conductive FM image a voltage between the tip of the FM and the substrate, the silicon substrate. They measure the current flow. They understand that when we have an inverted domain boundary, we have basically a short circuit between the tip of the FM and the bulk and the silicon. Instead, when we have a stacking fault, the stacking fault is able to drive current only when the tip is in forward for a positive voltage, okay, in forward polarization. Okay, then I finished. In conclusion, I showed you some properties of the most important defect, extended defect of 3C silicon carbide. I show you how they can interact each other. I showed the structure of the very structure of inverted domain boundary and the stacking fault at low and high magnification. I give you some ideas about the formation of the stacking fault seed during the growth, and I discussed with you the electrical behavior of the extended defects. Then I want to, thanks to all my colleagues, in particular to Corrado Bongiorno for the TEM analysis, to Giuseppe Greco for the electrical measurement, to Marcin Zeliski and Marco Moggeri for the crystal grow, Andrei Sarikov for other simulation that I did show here. And also to Francesco Lavia, that is the challenge project and coordinator. And I want to thank you also for your virtual presence and your kind attention. Okay, thank you.